Welcome to the Academic Writing Amplified podcast. On this podcast, we believe that the culture of academia needs to change radically. Women and non-binary people are revolutionizing academia within institutions that were not built for us. If you're ready to reject the culture of overwork, kick guilt and overwhelm to the curb, and amplify your voice to make a real impact on your field without breaking down or burning out, you're in the right place. With our team of experienced writing coaches as co-hosts, we'll share insights and talk to inspiring guests to bring you the practical strategies, systems, and mindset shifts you need to find time to write, publish work you love, and design your career on your terms. And it all starts with writing. Let's go. Welcome back to the Academic Writing Amplified podcast. I'm your host, Kathy Mazak, and I am so excited to introduce you to our new series all about writing practices. Now, we're going to cover everything from busting myths about writing practice to really defining what does a sustainable writing practice in academia look like, to really giving you the confidence to trust what you've been doing and develop it even further. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. We're so glad you're here. We have over 250 episodes in our back catalog. And what we are doing for the next little while is we are grouping previous kind of themes of content so that if you're new to listening to the podcast, or if you've been around a while, but man, it's been years since those early episodes. What I did was I looked through all 250 of our previous episodes and I created this series all addressing writing practice for scholars like you. Now, because some of these episodes are rather old, you might hear me talking about different programs or courses that I've offered over the years. I want to let you know that right now, the only program that we're offering is Navigate, and you can get on the wait list for our Navigate program by going to scholarsvoice.org/navigate. Navigate is a 12-week hybrid coaching plus recorded content program that is designed to help you publish your backlog of papers. So go check it out at scholarsvoice.org/navigate. and get ready to enjoy the writing practice series. Oh my goodness. Okay. Everything you learned about academic writing is wrong. Okay, it sounds harsh. I know, but the subtext, the secondary tagline is, and it's not your fault. It's the fault of how we are socialized inside of academia, how we learn from example in kind of, situations that maybe aren't the most ideal for learning how to write. So today I'm digging into 5 things that you learned about academic writing that are wrong and what you can do to fix them. My name is Kathy Mazak, and after becoming a tenured full professor, I founded a writing and publication-focused professional development company for academics called Scholars Voice. And I'm really happy to be talking to you today about, these things, common misconceptions that can lead professors astray when they are trying to get their amazing publications out in the world and actually making a difference in their field. Okay, so here's the first thing that you learned about academic writing that is wrong. The binge and bust method. Okay, so this is a method that many of us used as students to get work done. And not everybody, of course, but the doctoral student process, the graduate student experience is full of binge and bust, right? When we're trying to get a project done, a lot for our graduate coursework, a lot of times we're working up to a deadline. We have so many balls in the air during the graduate program. A lot of us are doing lab work plus coursework, and then we're dissertating plus lab work, plus maybe we're a TA or a graduate researcher. And all of those things can really make it so that we're juggling too many things And when a deadline's coming up, we like binge on that project, right? Like work on that project and then crash, right? So we take those cycles of binge and bust into our professorial lives as well, but they don't work for us anymore as professors. So that is one thing if you're trying to get your academic writing done by whatever the professorial equivalent is of pulling all-nighters, right? Which actually probably looks like writing all weekend or writing every evening and through the weekend up until a deadline. Like that kind of binge and bust is not sustainable. It wasn't really sustainable while you were in grad school either. And it's really not sustainable once you're a professor. So if you're thinking you're going to get your academic writing done and get your articles out by, binge writing and then crashing, this is not a sustainable method. Okay, the second thing you learned about academic writing that is wrong is that you must write every day in order to get your publications out. Now, this is almost the opposite of the binge and bust, right? It comes from this idea like we need to be very consistent. And consistent isn't bad. I'm not saying consistent is bad at all. But this idea of writing every day or writing a certain number of words a day, which is how this is often like translated, actually comes from novel writing. It comes from creative writing, right? It comes from this idea that you're going to write a lot and then edit back. And that is not a very efficient or even like logical idea when it comes to peer-reviewed papers and that kind of like much of the academic writing that we do. The reason is that, like, for example, if you're a scientist, the way that you start most of the writing or the composing of the paper happens when you are creating the figures. It's what are the figures? What's the order of the figures? What story do I want those figures to tell? And once you have that, the words on the page part, it's like easy, kind of like it flows or it can flow after that. So the idea like I need to write every day doesn't make sense for science writers. It doesn't make sense like for people who are writing around data, right? Either like anthropologists and social scientists who are qualitative researchers who are writing around data excerpts. It just doesn't like that write every day doesn't work. Besides the fact that also it can derail you. So if the motivation to write every day is this don't break the chain or the streak motivation, it's just not like it's not the best motivator, in my opinion, especially for myself as a mother. The kids were always interrupting. Any kind of streak I tried to do was always interrupted by children getting sick, pick them up from school early because something happened. Like, it's a mess. When you put all of your motivation around keeping a streak with something as important as your academic writing and publishing, I don't think that's the best way to go. Now, if it's working for you, by all means, write every day. Absolutely. All right. So thing number 3 that you learned about academic writing that is wrong is that there's a speed and yours is too slow. Okay, so have you thought of this? Is this a thought that you have in your head, right? Like there's a speed to how fast I am supposed to be producing articles or producing whatever kind of writing or writing my book or whatever, writing my grant. When you have an idea in your head, most of us do actually, right? Which is like, okay, I'm going to submit this. I'm going to write this article, let's say, and it's going to take me this many months or this many weeks, right? And then that deadline goes by and continues to go by and the project stretches out and it feels awful. And you have the secondary thought, which is, I'm too slow. Right? Like my writing, I'm a slow writer. I'm too slow at this. So what I want to tell you is that the only speed that matters is your speed. And actually, the thing you need to learn as a professor or as a researcher, like once you're you really could learn this before you get the PhD, but post PhD, when you're out in the world doing the work, trying to get the publications out there that are going to influence your field, the only thing that's important is how fast you do it. and really knowing how fast that is. Speed is not as important as predictability. So what you need to do is you need to learn how to predict how long it takes you to do things. And the only way that you can really do that is by practice, observation. We call it like collecting data on yourself, right? So that trying things, seeing what happens, reflecting on it, because it's way more important, especially for professors, that you know how long it takes you to do it than this like false idea of I'm too slow, there's a speed, and I'm not fast enough. That directly correlates with thing 4 that you learned about academic writing that is wrong, which is that time is your biggest obstacle, right? Like we think, oh, we got to be faster. And then another thing is, right? Like I don't have enough time, right? I don't have enough time. Many people say this. I say this occasionally where I'm like, there's not enough time in the day, like kind of those thoughts. And I mean, let's be real. There's the same amount of time every day. And what you have to do as a professor is figure out how you're going to allot it to the things that you want to and need to do in your life. Like not just in your work, but also in your life, because you have to take into consideration rest and recovery and all of those kinds of things. So your actual biggest obstacle is not time, it's alignment. And here's what I mean by that. You have, whether you've articulated them or not, right? You have a set of values around your life and your academic work. One of the tools that we use in our programs to help people kind of get what's important to them out is this academic mission statement tool. And we have clients write an academic mission statement according to a certain, template. And that helps them to really get a focus on like, okay, this is what my academic work is here to do. This is what I want to create in the world. This is who I am. This is who I am as a scholar, right? And this is what I want to do. The problem is that if you haven't articulated that, it's hard to like make sure that you're using your time in alignment with that mission or in alignment with your values. It's if you don't know, like if you've never sat down and taken the time to write an academic mission statement or to write out your values, it's really hard to like then align your time behind there. But that is exactly what your actual biggest problem is, right? We think it's like we're going to become professors and absolutely you are pulled in 1,000 directions. That is absolutely true. What the work is for you then to make a sustainable career is to make sure that you're making choices, conscious, deliberate choices about your time that are aligned with your mission and your values, right? Like we're not just giving away our time. We're far too specialized for that. We need to be very deliberate, have boundaries around our time, and make real choices about how we are spending the only most precious resource that you have, which is your time. So writing time, you will create it by developing your ability to align your activities that you do in your career with your academic mission and your values. All right. And the last thing that you learned about, the fifth thing that you learned about academic writing that's wrong is that teaching is your biggest obstacle to writing. So we hear this a lot from our clients and out there in the world, right? It's kind of like it feels like there's this choice that you have to make as an academic between teaching and research, right? That if you have a high teaching load, that you can't maintain your research. And it certainly is absolutely, right? Like, and logically more difficult to maintain your research program with a heavy teaching load. But that doesn't mean that it can't be done. And it's the same thing that I just talked about, right? It's about alignment. So the more that your teaching can be aligned with your research area so that your career starts to feel like one thing, like it's about one academic mission and you are moving everything, all the activities that you do during your work and your career, you're aligning that and putting that all in the service of your academic mission, the better it will be. When I was a tenured full professor, I was teaching a 4-4 load. And was it hard? Yeah, absolutely it's hard. But also, when you have a lot of structure to your time because you're teaching, right? Because you have scheduled places that you have to be. When you have that structure, there's actually an upside to it if you can manipulate that structure to work in your favor. And the upside to it is that you have to put these boundaries around your time. You have to create the time to write. You have to put energy and time into publication. And when you have some things on your schedule, for some people, it actually can get a little easier. And I'll just offer as a little bit of evidence of that. When you're on sabbatical, it can be like really, really difficult to get your writing done. Even though maybe that's the whole reason that you're on a sabbatical, because you don't have a structure to your time or a structure to your day. Teaching can help create that structure, and it also kind of like elevates the necessity to have boundaries around your writing time. And it can just be really wonderful to really think about the ways that our research and teaching can become integrated. It's great for students. It's good for you. Think about how many ways can you kind of double dip between your reading in your research area and your work with students, your teaching, your curriculum that you develop. So teaching is an obstacle, sure. I don't think it's your biggest obstacle. I think there's an upside. There's an upside to being a teacher researcher for sure. All right. So here's a few things that I did to help just to kind of finish out this story and talk about next steps. I could never write every day. That was something that I thought I was supposed to do. Like I said before, it never worked out for me. Another thing that happened was that I always, when I was a new professor, I always taught in the mornings. That's because all the old professors, nobody wanted to get up and teach the 7:30 in the morning class. And so the new professors usually got that class. The problem with that for me was that by the time I got to the afternoon, I was mentally drained for writing. So one of the things that really helped me, and again, this is teaching helps you, scheduled teaching, right? Helps you to realize some of these things if you can be reflective about them. What I figured out was that when I was able to schedule classes in the afternoon, I could use my great morning energy and my best time of day for writing instead of using my best time of day for teaching. Now, this is totally in line with how I work, right? Which is what I was saying before about the idea that there's a speed and yours is too slow. The important thing is you have to figure out for you what works. So for me, the first hours of the day are my mover and shaker hours. They're the hours I can get so much done. And then I hit a wall between 12:30, 2:30, 3 o'clock. I'm not very good, But if I'm in a group of people, obviously I'm going to rally. And so that really is something that when I realized that, and then I started to build my schedule around those kind of my strengths and my best way of working, when I built my schedule around that, it became so much better in terms of being able to really get my writing done. So I offer this to you as, a way to reflect on whether you have been falling into one of these traps, right? One of these 5 things that we kind of are taught about academic writing by our experience, especially as grad students, and think about ways that these things, maybe you've been thinking they're true for you, and now, you can release them and you can choose something different. Thank you so much for joining me today, and think about these ways that we've been kind of acculturated and that the things that we end up believing about academic writing and about how to get publications out that aren't necessarily true, or maybe they were true for you once and they're not true anymore. So have a wonderful day. Bye. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time supporting yourself and your writing by listening to this episode. If you like what you heard today, the best way to say thank you is to hop on over to Apple iTunes and write an honest review. The more reviews, the more amazing academic women and non-binary people will find this podcast. So go write one now.